Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kausti. Niaga Spotlight goes through the week in economic analysis and future affairs. Today on Analysis, we discuss e-hailing industry, pricing mechanisms and sustainability. Now, the e-hailing industry has become a crucial part of urban mobility, especially in cities like Kuala Lumpur, due to high traffic congestion and limited public transportation options. Revenue within Malaysia's ride-hailing market is projected to reach 2.29 billion ringgit by the end of 2025. And as of January this year, there are approximately 2.9 million e-hailing drivers nationwide. The number of e-hailing service users is also growing, with a 21% increase in active users in key cities during the first half of 2024, as reported by popular e-hailing platform providers. Additionally, the number of users in the ride-hailing market is expected to reach a very healthy 11.47 million users by 2029. However, recent discussions around setting a minimum fare floor for e-hailing services has sparked controversy and the key issue of sustainability. In 2023, the Malaysian government proposed a floor price for fares in response to concerns about driver welfare and competition-driven low fares. The fare structure has been increasingly criticized for being unsustainable, particularly for part-time drivers who do make up a significant proportion of the ride-hailing workforce. Part-time drivers, often dependent on e-hailing to supplement their income, struggle with fluctuating demand, rising fuel costs, as well as vehicle maintenance. Now, according to a 2022 report, drivers' average earnings were often less than the minimum wage after factoring in these expenses, leading to dissatisfaction. So, with the introduction of the floor price, the government aimed to ensure drivers earn a livable income, but the move also sparked concerns about making services unaffordable for consumers. Balancing the needs of drivers with the demands of passengers in Kuala Lumpur, where traffic congestion and demand for rides are high, is a challenging task. Wan Agyl Wan Hassan, founder with My Mobility Vision, joins me now in the studios for this extremely timely discussion and the path forward. Agyl, a very good morning. Thank you so much for making time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So a very interesting topic indeed, and one that you have been deeply involved in at the initial stages itself. So, Agyl, let's get started off by discussing how Malaysia's e-hailing industry can actually sustain this rapid growth while also looking at the concerns that we have brought up about sustainability and also for consumers, especially in our urban hubs.
All right. I think before we go there, let's understand the e-hailing industries first, right? So, e-hailing industries came into the country back in 2014 when Grab and Uber formed the businesses. And ever since that, it became essential parts of our urban mobility. And of course, when it comes to mode of choice, with the lack of first mile, last mile connectivity to public transportation, people start to use e-hailing services to get from one point to another point. And along the way, people start to use, even though it's not always and all the time, people use e-hailing services to just satisfy their needs for mobility. And this will need the industry to make sure that they keep the fares transparent. While people keep on using e-hailing services because it's part of their mobility experience, they also need to be very transparent on fares. I know companies like Grab, Bolt, eAsia, Go, InDrive and Maxim have different ways of setting up fares. But this will allow, if the transparency happens, it will allow people to predict their costs of mobility, which will definitely allow them to use the service more. Of course, on top of that, we cannot forget about the enabler of the service, which is the drivers. So, e-hailing companies also need to make sure that the drivers are well incentivized and make sure that they will be able to serve the public. Because without the drivers, there is no service can be provided, and it's like a chicken and egg situation. So you still need to take care of the public by not having too expensive fares, but you also need to make sure that the drivers have enough to bring home when it comes to this kind of service.
Exactly. Now, from what you've highlighted, Agyl, what I'm also noting is that there is also an increasing shift to taxis for many end users because of the fact that fare increases during peak hours are really proving to be pretty unsustainable on the average commuter's pocket, who is also, in general, a 9-to-5 worker who just wants to get home in the quickest way possible, right, during peak hours.
Yes.
So from there, let's move on into looking at the significant role of e-hailing when it comes to long-term urban mobility. So let's look at the potential long-term effects of actually imposing a minimum fare flow. That is, of course, the hottest and most controversial debated topic.
Exactly.
Is it good? Is it bad? Is it judicious? But looking at the big picture of the entire ecosystem and also raising the fact that drivers have their specific concerns.
Okay, let's go to the origin or the root cause of the problems. Now we know after 10 years, after 11 years of the existence of this industry, of course we can expect there will be problems when it comes to income and also fares. I mean, that's given. Now, the good part is when we introduce floor price, it will definitely address the concerns by the e-hailing drivers because, as you said, e-hailing drivers start to feel that whatever they made for the entire journey, the entire trip for a month is less than the minimum wage. That's what they claim. So we need to see that empirical studies. That's for a start. But let's say the floor price is installed, then it will cover or address their pain. But it will also give an impact to the fares. Because once the floor price is there, then the fares definitely will be increased. And this is the nature of demand and supply, the elasticity of fares. When you increase the price, the demand will drop. You might enjoy, as a driver, you might enjoy lucrative trips. One trip can be very expensive or at least make sense for the drivers, but it will start to not make sense to the users. So the users will start shying away from using the e-hailing services. So you have a lucrative trips, but you lose the chance and opportunity to make more trips because people will start weighing options of using a different services when it comes to wanting to get the e-hailing services. That's one. Number two, I think when it comes to stability, of course, this is the argument, the stability to the drivers. But what we're looking at is the stability to the entire ecosystems.
That's right.
I think it just makes sense for drivers to have more pace because they say that if you want me to serve, then I need to get paid more. Now, there's another component, which is the public. If you want me to use your service, I need to make sure that it is an affordable service.
Sure, and no demand, of course, reduced supply.
Now, there are the two components that we haven't discussed properly. The government, who are going to whether enforce or enable innovations, and the industry player who do have the technology that can help the government to make sure that it can be addressed through innovations. So floor price, in my views, my personal view, is not the answer. I'm not saying that I'm against it totally. We might need to look into it, maybe have a flexible ways of having the floor price because of the differences between permanent and also temporary workers in the...
So a flexible floor price, that's the key that I'm picking up from you.
Flexible floor price. But again, let's have government and the industry player to work together to find innovative solutions to this.
So what would it look like, Agyl, in ideally speaking, if the government is wanting to ensure that the welfare of these part-time e-hailing drivers is also adequately protected, but at the same time not wanting to compromise on ride-hailing services for the general public while our mass transit system is still in the works of ensuring maximum ridership and maximum coverage also?
Of course. So when we look at the part-time e-hailing drivers, right? So they have a different motivations when it comes to income. Because for them, it's all about making supplementary income because whatever I'm earning now is not enough. Or maybe...
Quite likely, yeah.
If it's just enough, then they want to make more so that they can have a better quality of life. That's given. But they also do not... I mean, they shouldn't go through the same hoops like the permanent e-hailing drivers because they just depends on whatever time availability that they have or they have their set of time frame that they want to work in this industry. So government need to make sure that the regulation that will be imposed will not hurt them because when you have over regulations, the part-time drivers will start feel the pain and they will leave. For example, I'm taking back the floor price argument, right?
Right.
It's not only about the part-time drivers. The small timers, the small companies who providing e-hailing services also will die off because they cannot keep up with the regulation change.
Stifling innovation, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
So, going back to these part-time e-hailing drivers, we need to offer flexible solutions. For example, tiered regulations. Maybe they do not have to go through the same regulations like the permanent drivers.
Okay.
But they go into a tiered regulation where they need to comply on certain compulsory regulations. Flexible protection, for example. Maybe we can offer proper security packages for permanent drivers, but for part-time drivers, there must be a flexible package that will allow them to have important protections. For example, giving you a simple example, permanent workers might need the income protection when they've been hospitalized, they need the income replacement, but maybe not to the part-time drivers. I mean, there is no right or wrong here, because we still need to discuss about how flexible and how dynamics that we can make the regulations be. And of course, we need to incentivize them to make sure that they go to the underserved areas. So that let's not get them compete with the permanent e-hailing drivers in the same
within the same
areas.
zone.
Yeah,
correct.
Because we also know that because technology will allow us to know that they are underserved areas, right? Let's incentivize them. Because they're part-time anyways, right? So those part-time drivers should be incentivized to go to underserved areas so that those people in those areas will be able to access healing services.
So that actually, it would be an extremely useful and interesting use of big tech, and using the fact that you can actually calculate and categorize the different drivers that you have within one structure, right? Okay, so from there though, Agyl, I want to talk about the fact that we've got a projected increase for e-hailing users themselves by 2029, a couple of years down the road, but it's good to always look forward, right?
Quite impressed with the numbers.
Yes, exactly. A projected 11.47 million riders and users in Malaysia alone. So how is the industry that is already dealing with quite a few challenges right now when it comes to sustainability, etc., how will the growing demand for services actually be addressed? Because we're also going to be looking at traffic congestion and limited public transportation options, perhaps changing a little bit in flexibility, but if anything, the urban population is only going to increase.
Exactly. I think we always have this dilemma of first mile, last mile connectivity.
Very true, for decades.
Yeah, and using that argument and summarize it or conclude that our public transportation system in the city like KL is not up to standards or expectations by the public. I think it's time for us to really look into how we can unify the services that we have, because we have spent billions of dollars building infrastructures, right? And just having this first mile, last mile connectivity shouldn't let the public do not shift.
Exactly, it's a constant thorn.
I mean, you cannot use that argument, I can't go to the train station because the first mile, last mile connectivity is not there. So let's have that partnership happen between e-hailing companies, which I know that it's happening between Grab and Prasarana, if I'm not mistaken, on the DRT services. But let's have more e-hailing companies to be part of that unified solutions.
Which would perhaps mean integrating the e-hailing services with maybe train, even bus schedules?
To allow the user to have a seamless transition from one mode to another modes, right? Because we know for a fact that if you want to go to the train station, it's either you take a bus, which God knows when it's going to arrive, or maybe you walk in the heat or in the rain.
That's right.
Or worst case is drive to the stations and end up you do not have parkings and you drive all the way to the destinations.
Very true. And in peak hours, urban commuters have a very fixed time allocation within which they need to get to destinations.
Exactly. That's one area that we can look at. The second area that we can look at is perhaps we can expand ride sharing to a really meaningful ride sharings.
All right, what would that look like, Agyl?
Now, the e-hailing services is you own a car and then you serve the public. That's what people see ride sharing is all about. But ride sharing, the real ride sharing is about you sharing the car with other people's. I think Grab used to have this service before, but I don't know why it's not popular.
They've actually recently reintroduced it under a so-called saver option.
Yeah. So let's have that more, but supported by local council by allowing them to have the right of way. For example, if you have a traffic congestion, then you spare one lane for bus services and ride sharings. Allow them to enjoy that seamless travel experience and let those people who drive stuck in the congestions, allow them to have a parking priorities at the commercial areas.
Right.
So those kind of things, I think, that will allow industry to adapt with the growing demand, because then they will not be in the same situation like other traffic or other car users.
So basically offering a value-added option
Exactly.
if you opt for ride-hailing.
Yes.
Fantastic. So then Though, however, let's say if a fare floor is introduced ultimately for Malaysia, Agyl, could it also inadvertently lead to a rise in illegal or unregulated ride-sharing services? And if so, how can the policymakers, the government, address such potential risks if they are looking at actually rolling it out?
Okay. The first thing that when we discuss about the floor price of fare, we know for a fact that it will shy away the users, and then drivers might not be able to enjoy more trips while they're enjoying a lucrative one single trip.
Right.
Now, what will happen then? In my experience, when I was in SPAD back in 2012 until 2018, you know that these people will go to shadow, meaning that they will create an illegal e-hailing services.
Right.
We are Malaysians and we are very creative when it comes to solutions. I have to give that to us. But sometimes people will use that creativity to go beyond and not complying to the law.
Right.
So when they go to the underground providing illegal services, this is where it will create harm to the public, because illegal services, the public are not protected. The insurance is not going to cover for you. And when you are not using a proper mechanism as per the required by the law, then the entire system will collapse, because people will start looking at, oh, we shouldn't stay in the light because it's not enough for us. Let's go to the shadow because the illegal services will give us more money. And of course, while we want drivers to earn fair income, I think then fair floor price will help, but we need to be very careful on pushing these fares. I would suggest the government to really look into it together with the operators. Before we really go into pushing this agenda, let's find other options first. Perhaps I give you an example. When there is a dead mileage, when you book Grabs, for example, the drivers will pick you up, but the moment they pick you up until they're really picking you up, that mileage are not paid.
Yes, that's right.
That's the dead mileage. Then they'll start comparing with the trip they made for you. Then they'll start feeling that, oh, it's not enough.
Not worth it,
and
perhaps.
Then some people will experience cancellations.
Very
trips,
true, very
right?
true. Yeah.
Now, assuming, I think there's companies trying to find a way of funding it. Fund the dead mileage, meaning that the calculation of fares will start from the moment you accept the booking, not from the moment you pick up the trips. So accept booking, kick in the fare, then you will have the fare count in the entire journey until you drop off. Now, but that money cannot be funded by operators just like that, because they need to increase fares. There is a component of that fares that belong to the operators, which is the commissions. But the commissions are capped by the government. What if we allow that commission to be dynamics? Then whatever money that made from that commissions, that threshold will go to the pool, then that money will go and fund the debt mileage. That is one of the innovations that we can explore, because the operators have the wealth of the data. They know which trip they can charge more commission, which trip they charge low commissions. Then it becomes win-win situation to everyone, to the operators, to the drivers, and also to the public.
Well worth considering, right? Which brings me naturally to the question, Agyl, about so how can the e-hailing platforms themselves take more of a active stakeholdership role and collaborate with local authorities, public transport system services as well, so that we can have that more integrated and efficient system? Perhaps not today in 2025, but at least within the next 3 to 4 years.
Well, as I mentioned just now, there is a need to collaborate between public transport operators, e-hailing operators, local councils, to make sure that public will have a seamless journey experience. Like I said, connecting or marrying public transport like rail services and bus services with e-hailing services under one single payment, for example. So you do not have to make different payment all the time when you change modes. So you can also explore the idea of a discount e-hailing fares if you use that e-hailing services to train station, like what Singapore
as a supplement,
did. As a supplement, right? You can also have perhaps explore the unified mobile apps like mobility as a service, where people do not have to switch between platforms via different apps. So you can just use one app, book the e-hailing services, know your bus schedule, pay your train tickets, get your micro-mobility, for example, which is yet to be regulated. So under one single platform called mobility as a service. And maybe you can even rent a car on that platforms. So these kind of technology innovations need to happen. Maybe not now. I mean, it's not a rocket science. Many countries already explored it. But I think government need to seriously think about having that unified apps that allow everyone to use just one single window to move from one point to another point, even though using a multiple modes.
That multimodal integration of platforms, right?
Exactly.
Now, let's think about technology and data analytics, of which the back end of the e-hailing service providers, the platforms, they already have a wealth of it. So how can it help to improve pricing models and driver compensation systems in the meantime, as we're working on, hopefully, the government rolling out these one card to rule them all?
Okay. So I think one thing that we need to be very clear is that the owner of the technology definitely able to find ways, innovative ways to come up with the solutions. But they need to be guided by the government, and they need to get inputs from the drivers and publics. That is the framework that we should look at. The technology that they have that allow them to do a predictive analysis. For example, after 10 years, can you imagine if a platform cannot predict what kind of traffic that we're looking at? Then it will allow them to predict what kind of fares that we are looking at. So this kind of predictive tools is already in place, but it needs to be empowered by the government and allow government to understand what kind of innovation that they can do with this kind of tools. That's number one. Number two, we also can use this tool to expand the services for better coverage.
Right.
Last decade, we didn't have any idea where the taxi is, right? You need to wait on the street and hail them if they are there. And the taxi didn't know where you are, even though you needed taxis. But today, there is accessibility and visibility of the services.
Live data as well.
It's a live data. So those kind of things will allow operators, platform operators, to expand the services to underserved areas because they already have the demand data. That demand data will allow them to predict what kind of demand pattern will look like in the future. And of course, we also need to look into fair compensation beyond just more rides. I mean, we cannot just simply ask them to do more rides so that drivers can earn more, but having a proper analytics that allow operators to incentivize performer drivers. So those performer drivers should be incentivized, but of course, those incentives will cost them money. But government need to also be very relaxed on regulations that allow them to be more flexible in getting more income that will allow them to give back to the drivers.
Exactly.
So those kind of things, it must be like, it must be, I mean, government cannot be enforcers all the time. Governments need to be enabler. So they do not have the skill set, they do not have the technology, but they need to be able to guide the owner of the technology to do the right things. And this requires a proper collaborations and discussion. And it cannot just simply shove things into their throats. And these businesses will definitely retaliate.
Exactly. And also whether or not the businesses survive, or is it only going to be the monopolies that are allowed to?
That's another thing.
Exactly. So Agyl, let's end out the discussion perhaps with some final thoughts that you have actually about introduction of a minimum fare floor, but how it can also lead to environmental impacts, which perhaps are not even the focus right now, but definitely we already do know that urban and traffic congestion does lead to excessive levels of CO2 in the air, and also the level of air quality. Of
course. I think when you push the floor price, as we discussed earlier, you will get less trips, right? But less trip doesn't mean that you are not going to pollute the environment, because you are getting those cars idling around without customers.
There you go.
That is a simple understanding how the floor price impact towards the environment. That's number one. Number two, when people start to feel that it is expensive and not affordable enough to use e-hailing services, those people who have access to cars will start driving back. Whether they drive to the stations, and then they drive to the station, they couldn't get a parking, and then they just drive all the way to the destination, or maybe they just decided to drive all the way, right? And you have more cars on the roads, and we already have what? We already lose 54 to 56 million a year when it comes to burning of fuels. Just imagine about that. What kind of environment that we are? Yeah, that's how the environment situation looks like. And of course, if we want to, we need to make sure that it aligns with our SDG agenda. So we also very loud about environment crisis, climate crisis. We are very loud about green mobility. But these simple solutions of trying to solve the income matters will definitely not going to align with our green agenda.
Fantastically put. Agyl, thank you so much for the discussion and all the insights. We really hope the right stakeholders are listening.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we have time for today on Niaga Spotlight. We'll see you again next week with more economic analysis and insights. I'm Tamina Kausji signing off for now. Here's to a productive week ahead.